I'm like shaking. I'm freezing. I don't know about how all y'all doing, but this is when the umbrella breaks. So this is, I'm going to try to hammer this out. I'm always a soft speaker, so hopefully people can hear what I'm going to say. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes. Do you need this? I don't know.
Pardon?
Do you need this?
Oh no, I have one.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm probably gonna bust out whatever the thing is. That was beautiful. Christine, that was epic. What a beautiful way. One of the things that made me think of responding to the flotillas and this kind of like decentralized action, right, was the fishing. Right? So much attention, how like sometimes we don't realize the ripple effect that happens through our actions and our engagements, right? We may have one intention, but there are these secondary or tertiary things that might happen that we're not prepared for. And one of the beautiful things was like people were able to fish because the IOF was so engaged and busy trying to attend to the ships that the intelligence of the people on the ground were like, okay man, fucking get the nets, let's go. And so like we never know what ripple effects we're gonna have. So that was such a beautiful thing, Christine. That was great. So I want to set the tone. I'm gonna try not to shiver throughout this. I want to extend so much thanks and gratitude to Scotia and everybody with Nova Scotia Student Strike. All the people on this campus who have been organizing, be them staff, be them students, be them faculty, whoever. This isn't necessarily the most politicized campus, and so to have events like this and to have people from outside this campus come to engage in solidarity, and for people off this campus to feel comfortable that this might be a place to actually organize politically, it's just wonderful to do that, so thank you. This is also like a beautiful yet tragically important moment, right? Like right now, like I would argue more acutely than probably what we've seen in a generation is the bankruptcy of the state and the government. There's a moment of beauty and clarity there where we're actually becoming more aware that maybe elected officials, right, aren't really the people who are going to engage, listen, or initiate any type of substantive change, right? The fact some of you may have seen the post that a parent member of parliament or MLAs don't even listen to their constituents here, like that tells us something, and there's something like good for us to take away from that. That maybe it's events like this where we're organizing from below, that's actually where real change happens, right? I'm not going to throw shade at any organization, but when you think of even Gaza itself, it may not necessarily be a certain organization that speaks for the Palestinian people. Maybe it's the people in the communities themselves that are speaking for themselves. So I think there's something there for us to think through. And for us to get to celebrate, right? That let's do something different. And with that, some of you also may be aware or are going to be aware this coming March that there's going to be actions. There's going to be a week of organized mass dissent. There's going to be a week of strikes that are going to happen across Nova Scotia campuses where students are going to be engaging in their power. And so this is a moment where we can begin to organize around that type of activity. So, with that being said, it's good for us to talk about our power, right? So one of the things when we think about power is there's a term, I know it may be a bullshit term or whatever, but there's a phrase, there's a terminology that some of us use called labor power, right? And labor power is simply that all people, every one of us, have physical and mental capacities. Every one of us have cognitive, right? Pragmatic aptitudes and abilities, every one of us. And it's important for us to like recognize that, you know, we may have these, but like we don't necessarily get to like participate in those powers. right? So some of you, anybody ever, like, there's an art, right? That's so fucking beautiful. We have, like, if you want to, like, rock out and do some art, you can go do it. Anybody, like, an artist here? Or no? Like, anybody musician here? Anybody engaged in sports here, right? Like, none of us come out of the womb like kicking a soccer ball like Beckham, right? None of us come into this world like theorizing like Khaldun, right? None of us like are able to come out and like rock out a Monet or anything like this. We have a labor power that we devote to like getting better at who and what we are, right? Like, sometimes we engage with relationships. How you engage in a relationship is you learn how to become better as a parent or a partner. How to become better as a culture, somebody who's down with whatever your activity is. But what happens with labor power is at some point, sometimes it's so slow we don't even notice it, that we like become estranged from that labor power. We become estranged from like that ability that we have to like be better than what we are at any given point in time. And what interrupts that power, as normalized as it is, right, as encouraged as we might be to do it, is that many of us, the vast majority of us, end up selling that labor power in order to just meet the needs that we have. Right? We have less and less time to do the art that we might want to do. We have less and less time to be the parent that we want to be with our kids. Right? We have less and less time to be attentive as a partner. Right? But we have more and more of our labor power, not self-directed, but decided and arranged by somebody outside of ourselves, that we're compelled. Power that opens up the door to us also talking about a strike. Right? That a strike, in some ways, is when a group of us start to collectively organize together and withhold that power. We recognize our labor power isn't being self-directed. We recognize that our labor power isn't really of our own. Somebody is not only appropriating that power, but they're like taking it. And they're profiting from our ability to develop ourselves. So the interesting thing is, if we can tap into who it is that's alienating that labor power from us, then collectively we can respond to that alienation, that estrangement. The other thing that a strike does is it provides us like an actual expression of hope, right? It's an action of optimism where we can actually start to foster something for the benefit of the people that are being scraped of their value. Now, yeah, I may pause it there right there, because I do want to hit this to keep this in point to what we're here to talk about, but I want to set a tone maybe. Sometimes we think of that selling of our labor power as just of a wage, right? Oh, I just sell my labor. But you don't, right? If we start to understand that our labor power is estranged from us, it's not that you're selling your labor, it's that you're being lost in that process. You are starting to be evaporated for the benefit of somebody else. So if we can understand what labor power is, then maybe we can start to understand the importance of a strike. Sometimes strikes come off as spontaneous, right? And sometimes they can be, right? Like having a wildcat strike is important, but there's a lot of dense, rich, complex organizing that happens underneath any type of event. A strike is just the kind of like catalyst of time organizing and spending this type of activity together. So with that being said, in Canada, we tend to narrow a strike to like a labor action. And what I mean by a labor action is like we arrange it around our work, right? Where we sell that labor power. But in many parts of the world, a strike is far more complex, right? It's not as narrowly defined as something that's just around our work. So some of us have been paying attention, even in the last couple of weeks, to places like Italy, right? Where not just one day, consistently being repeatedly rolled over time and again, we're seeing upwards of 2 million people engaging in a general strike, right? Both people working and not working, not to get a fucking extra dollar for a wage, not to respond to recession, but people withdrawing their labor power because they're recognizing the erasure of people, right? They're deciding where can my action, where can my labor power be most felt? You know where it's going to be felt? I'm going to withdraw it. So that in and of itself has ripple effects. So we've seen that throughout October in Italy. On the 15th of October, we saw in Spain, in Catalonia, in the Basque Country, we've seen hundreds of thousands of people also engage in a general strike, right? The ramifications of that is that even in London, at the same time where we see hundreds of thousands of far-right people not really knowing why they're pissed off, but trying to blame somebody why they're pissed off, at the same time leading up to that, on the 11th, was it, of October, in London we saw 600,000 people in solidarity with the people of Palestine, in solidarity with the people in Italy, in solidarity with the people in Spain, Catalonia, right? Basque, be like, enough's enough, let's hit the streets. So strikes are going to be important. Withholding our labor power is going to be important. But that brings us then to how do we do that in a country where we still think a strike is about, oh my goodness, we still think a strike, it's my fault for bringing a shit umbrella. Canada, we might find it hard to think of a strike outside of wage-based labor, right? So there's somebody some of you may know, there's a sociologist named Alan Sears, who back in 2005 started thinking about infrastructures of dissent. Alan comes out of Windsor, Ontario, old school working class industrial auto manufacturing city. And one of the things that he talks about is these infrastructures of dissent were always present. When he was growing up, there was always two things. There was a geographical space where people outside of the workplace would come together. Not just in the workplace, but outside, to organize how do we want to set up the community we want to live in. And not only how we want to set it up, who's deterring us from setting up the community we want. So he would talk about these infrastructures of dissent and the geographies that we need. Because those geographies, these infrastructures of dissent were so powerful, they were attacked viciously in Canada as they were all over the place. We study this through organized abandonment. Some people want to call it neoliberalism, do whatever. But these infrastructures were attacked. Some of them were attacked so bad they're gone. Others were attacked so bad it's just scaffolding, like this shit show here. So the interesting thing is, if we know how powerful these infrastructures of dissent are, maybe we need to revisit that. So the university, like what Nova Scotia Student Strike is doing, like what students at Acadia are doing, staff are doing, scholars are doing here, and all across Nova Scotia, how do we set up these infrastructures here? So the university often gets heralded as this place of critical thinking, right? But the university can't be misunderstood. The university is here as an integral instrument for, no, don't worry about it, man, it's not too bad. It's not, it make me feel super uncomfortable too. It's like the university is here as an integral instrument for capital. We can't miss that that's what the university is. So the university, for some of us, we see it as a site of social reproduction for capital. So on the one side, the university is obviously this place where we advance education, right? Where certain types of research gets funded, right? We want to engage in policy alternatives to an existing system of politics, right? That we want to support progress. That, to some of us, is overt and aware, right? You're reproducing the next set of would-be workers. But at the same time, what's going on in universities, especially right now, is there's another type of training of social reproduction. That's not just training in advanced education, it's training in debt, right? It's training in how to be disciplined. It's training in how to be compliant, right? How to deal with stress and the bullshit of life in a nice and construct time frame, right? So we're being trained in this capitalist social reproductive system. But at the same time, as with any capitalist infrastructure, any type of workplace, there's always contradictions, right? One of the contradictions at a university is, as much as they want to advance education, they have to keep at least small pockets of critical engagement open, right? You can't just cookie cutter everybody. You have to keep some pockets open for some critical opening. Now what that happens, or what could happen, is it creates really dangerous pockets, right? Where people actually really start to understand, oh wow, like what really is the authentic role of the state, right? Like what really is the government there to do, right? We start to learn not just of like the realities of ecological crisis, but we learn and start to put the dots together of what's the cause of ecological crisis, right? We might even, if we're afforded the opportunity, to actually get to be exposed to the realities of imperialism and settler colonialism. That's dangerous shit, right? That's a contradiction, because that opens up the door for us to start to recognize, as much as we're being ingrained to become these like docile workers, it's also showing us what the problems are and maybe where they stem from. So if that's taking place and this kind of this infrastructure of dissent isn't there, then maybe the university can be a really effective place for us to start thinking how to reshape the university. Not from the top down, but like this. To use the university's geography itself, to use the infrastructure here as a way to contest what we see as being a problem. When you look at what's going on the last 2 years, like Gaza opens up a door, and not just Gaza, but Gaza opens up a door of that contradiction, right? We're able to like learn about settler colonialism and have some bullshit teepee that like we visit, you know, for a class once a year, something like this. But like we're live streaming the erasure of people for very specific reasons, right? So like that opens up a door to show us how dangerous the university actually is. And what was the response? Immediately, with the encampments, with preemptive policies at some institutions to silence the ability of dissent. And if that wasn't in place, outright coercive suppression, right? So you would actually see police or armed actors of the state, or maybe hired security forces, to displace any type of understanding of what's actually going on. So if we're shown that that's taking place, then that affords us an opportunity to maybe respond. So I brought up Alan Sears as a dude who talks about the infrastructure for dissent. Another Alan named Alan Wald, some of you may know, does critical education work in the States. He talked about we need to recreate and shape universities as havens for dissent, right? Just like Christine talked about, like this diversified kind of pockets of how can we like set up shop to respond to problems. If we create, as we are right now, havens for dissent, then we can set up ripple effects that do more than just talk, right? Because universities right now are more than happy for us to talk about theory as long as we don't engage in practice. So when we do theory and practice, we are actually turning this place into something more than what it wants us to think it is. It's something more than just a place of social reproduction. It's a place where maybe